What if I told you that your real estate agent is scamming you the exact same way the Ku Klux Klan scammed America? What if I told you that the most dangerous thing in your neighbor's backyard is not the gun locked in their closet, it's the swimming pool their kids are playing in right now? What if I told you that crack cocaine dealers, the ones the media portrayed as rolling in mountains of cash, actually earn less than minimum wage and still live with their moms? And what if I told you that the single biggest reason crime dropped in America in the 90s wasn't more police, wasn't tougher sentencing, wasn't a better economy? It was a Supreme Court ruling about abortion made 20 years earlier. Today, we're going to destroy everything you think you know about how the world works. We're going to take one of the most mind-blowing books ever written, Freakonomics, by Steven Levitt and Stephen Dubner, and we're going to break it down piece by piece until your brain is leaking out of your ears. This isn't a typical economics video. There are no supply and demand curves, no GDP forecasts, no boring graphs. This is economics as a weapon, a tool to slice through the lies, the propaganda, and the comfortable delusions that society feeds you every single day. By the end of this video, you will never look at a school teacher, a real estate listing, a drug dealer, a crime statistic, or even a baby name the same way again. If you make it to the end of this video, I'm going to reveal a single data point so shocking that when it was first published, it literally ended a politician's career. Stick around. Welcome to Stonks Forum. I'm your host, and today's video is a big one. Grab a coffee, grab a snack. Maybe cancel your afternoon plans, because we're about to go deep. Before we start, if you're new here, this is a channel where we take big ideas from economics, finance, and behavioral science and break them down in ways that actually make sense. We don't do jargon. We don't do gatekeeping. We just do the truth. And sometimes the truth is stranger than fiction. If that sounds like your kind of content, do me a huge favor right now. Hit that subscribe button and the bell icon. We're on a mission to hit our next subscriber milestone, and every single one of you who subscribes brings us one step closer. It takes half a second and it means the world. All right, let's get into it. Here's the core idea of Freakonomics, and I want you to burn this into your brain because it's going to reframe every single thing we talk about today. If morality represents how people would like the world to work, then economics shows how it actually works. Read that again. Let it sink in. We all walk around with this comfortable narrative about how things operate. Politicians are here to serve the people. Teachers are dedicated to your children's education. Experts know what they're talking about. The police are here to protect you. Parents who read to their kids every night are raising geniuses. And all of that might be completely wrong. Steven Levitt isn't your typical economist. He doesn't care about the stock market. He can't tell you whether the economy is going to grow or shrink. He once described himself by saying, and I'm paraphrasing here, that he doesn't know much about the field of economics, he's not good at math, and it would be total fakery if he claimed to know anything about taxes or deflation. So what does he do? He asks questions, weird questions. Questions that no self-respecting economist would ever touch. Questions like, why do drug dealers still live with their mothers? Which is more dangerous, a gun or a swimming pool? Do real estate agents actually work in your best interest? Why do teachers cheat on standardized tests? Is sumo wrestling fixed? These aren't the questions economists are supposed to ask. But Levitt figured out something that his peers missed. Economics, at its core, is just the study of incentives. That's it. Strip away all the jargon, all the formulas, all the pretension, and economics is simply about understanding what motivates people to do what they do. And once you understand incentives, truly understand them, the world opens up like a cheat code. And speaking of cheat codes, in the next section, I'm going to show you how a rogue economist caught hundreds of teachers cheating on standardized tests using nothing but math. And the method he used is absolutely brilliant. Let's start with the foundation of everything. Incentives. Levitt breaks incentives into 3 categories, and understanding these 3 types will change how you see every transaction, every relationship, and every institution in your life. Type 1. Economic incentives. This is the most obvious kind. You do something because you'll get paid more, or you avoid something because it'll cost you money. Simple. If gas prices go up, you drive less. If your boss offers a bonus, you work harder. Classic stuff. Type 2. Social incentives. You do something because you want people to think well of you, or you avoid something because you don't want to be seen as the bad guy. Think about why people recycle even when nobody's checking. Think about why you hold the door for strangers. Social incentives are incredibly powerful, sometimes even more powerful than money. Type 3. Moral incentives. You do something because it's the right thing to do, regardless of whether anyone sees you or whether you get paid. You don't steal from the tip jar at Starbucks not because there's a camera, there might not be, and not because someone would judge you, nobody might notice, but because you know it's wrong. Now here's where it gets interesting. These three types of incentives can work together beautifully, but they can also collide in catastrophic and completely unpredictable ways. Let me tell you a story that perfectly illustrates this. A group of economists in Israel were studying a problem at a daycare center. Parents kept showing up late to pick up their kids. The teachers were stuck waiting around, unpaid, while parents leisurely finished their tennis games or their coffee dates. So the daycare center did what seemed logical. They introduced a fine, $3 every time you were late. Problem solved, right? Economic incentive activated. Parents will stop being late. Wrong. Dead wrong. After the fine was introduced, the number of late pickups actually increased, and not by a little, by a lot. What happened? Before the fine, parents had a moral incentive to be on time. They felt guilty making the teacher wait. That guilt was a powerful motivator. But the moment you slap a $3 price tag on being late, you transform the moral transaction into an economic one. Now it's not about guilt, it's about a fee. And $3? That's nothing. That's cheaper than a babysitter. So parents essentially said, great, for $3 I can be as late as I want. Bargain. But here's the truly horrifying part. When the economist removed the fine after 17 weeks, hoping the guilt would come back, it didn't. The number of late pickups stayed high. The moral incentive had been permanently destroyed. Once you turn a moral obligation into a market transaction, you can't go back. Remember this principle. It's going to come back later when we talk about how parents spend thousands of dollars on things that have zero effect on their children's success. But first, the book opens one of its most brilliant chapters by asking a provocative question, who cheats? And the answer, backed by mountains of data, is almost everyone. We all cheat, at least a little, when the incentives are right. But let's talk about a specific kind of cheating that will blow your mind. Teachers cheating on standardized tests. In the mid-1990s, Chicago public schools introduced what they called high-stakes testing. This was a system where schools with low test scores would be put on probation. Teachers in those schools could be fired or reassigned. The schools themselves could be shut down entirely. No more social promotion. Kids who didn't hit a minimum score on the Iowa test of basic skills wouldn't move to the next grade. Now think about the incentive structure here from the teacher's perspective. If your students score badly, you might lose your job. If they score well, you might get promoted, praised, maybe even receive a bonus. In California, bonuses for high-performing teachers reached $25,000. The upside is massive. The downside is terrifying. And here's the kicker. Teacher cheating was almost never investigated. It was barely even considered as a possibility. There was no audit system, no oversight. If a teacher wanted to cheat, the coast was clear. So how would a cheating teacher actually do it? Think about it for a second. You've got a stack of multiple choice answer sheets. You've got an hour before they need to be turned into the electronic scanner. You're not going to change every answer on every student's test. That would be obvious. Here's what a smart cheating teacher would do. She'd pick a string of about 8 to 10 consecutive questions, probably toward the end of the test where the questions are harder. She'd memorize the correct answer pattern. Then she'd erase the wrong answers and fill in the correct ones for about half to 2/3 of her students. Not all of them. That would be suspicious. Just enough to bump the class average into the safe zone. Now here's the genius part. Steven Levitt got his hands on a database containing every single test answer for every Chicago public school student from 3rd through 7th grade, spanning from 1993 to 2000. We're talking about roughly 30,000 students per grade per year. More than 700,000 complete test answer sets. Nearly 100 million individual answers. And he built an algorithm to find the cheaters. The algorithm looked for several red flags simultaneously. First, unusual blocks of identical answers, especially on the hardest questions. If 10 students who historically scored poorly all suddenly got the last 5 questions correct in an identical pattern, that's suspicious. Second, Strange patterns within individual tests, like getting the hard questions right but missing the easy ones. Third, and this is the kill shot, classrooms where scores spiked dramatically in one year and then crashed back down the next year. Because of a teacher cheats this year, the students' inflated scores disappear when they move to an honest teacher next year. When Levitt ran his algorithm, the results were staggering. He identified roughly 200 classrooms where cheating had almost certainly occurred. And when the Chicago school system, rather than dismissing his findings, actually invited him in for retesting, the results confirmed his algorithm. The suspected cheating classrooms showed dramatically lower scores on the retest. The cheaters were identified. Think about that. A single economist armed with nothing but data and a clever algorithm did something that the entire school administration couldn't do. He caught the liars. By the way, if you're finding this interesting so far, just wait. We're barely getting started. The drug dealer section later in this video is going to absolutely destroy your understanding of street economics. But if you're enjoying this, do me a favor and smash that like button right now. YouTube's algorithm is watching, and every like tells YouTube to push this video to more people who would love it. It takes 1 second. Thank you. Now let's take this same principle. Incentives create predictable patterns of cheating and apply it to something completely unexpected. Sumo wrestling. Sumo is Japan's national sport. It's surrounded by ceremony, tradition, and an almost sacred reverence. The idea that sumo could be corrupt feels borderline sacrilegious. But Levitt looked at the data and found something very, very interesting. Here's how sumo works. Each wrestler competes in 15 bouts per tournament. If you finish with a winning record, 8 wins or more, you rise in the rankings. If you finish with a losing record, you drop. Your rank determines everything: your income, your lifestyle, your prestige. The difference between 7 wins and 8 wins is enormous. It's the difference between moving up and falling down. Now imagine it's the last day of the tournament. A wrestler with a 7 record is fighting a wrestler with an 8-6 record. The 7 wrestler desperately needs this win. His entire career ranking is on the line. The 8-6 wrestler, he's already safe. He's already got his winning record locked in. Whether he finishes 9, 6, or 8, 7 barely matters. If sumo were completely honest, the 7 wrestlers should win this matchup about 48.7% of the time. That's what his historical performance would predict. But when Levitt analyzed the data, the 7 wrestler won 79.6% of the time. Let me say that again, nearly 80% of the time. That is a statistical impossibility in honest competition. Something was going on behind the scenes. It gets worse. When those same 2 wrestlers faced each other again in the next tournament, when the stakes were reversed or neutral, the wrestler who had lost suspiciously before suddenly started winning at abnormally high rates. It was a quid pro quo. You let me win today when I need it, and I'll let you win next time when you need it. And when the data was cross-referenced with wrestlers who had ties to the same training stables, the match-fixing patterns became even more pronounced. Sumo wrestlers from affiliated stables were essentially running an underground trading ring of wins and losses. The establishment denied all of it, of course. But years later, several sumo wrestlers came forward and confirmed exactly what the data had predicted. Some of them described not just trading wins, but actual cash payments. Bribes changing hands in the sacred sport of sumo. Incentives don't care about tradition. Incentives don't care about honor. When the reward for cheating is high enough and the risk of getting caught is low enough, human beings will cheat, whether they're Chicago school teachers or Japanese sumo wrestlers wrapped in sacred tradition. But here's the beautiful counterpoint. And this is one of my favorite stories in the entire book. There was a man named Paul Feldman. He was a high-level research analyst in Washington, D.C., the kind of guy who studied public policy and crunched numbers for a living. Every week, he would bring bagels into the office for his colleagues with a cash box where people were supposed to pay. Honor system. Drop $1 in the box, take a bagel. Feldman noticed that people almost always paid, and he became fascinated. Eventually, he quit his high-paying job to become a full-time bagel delivery man. Seriously, he drove around Washington, D.C., dropping off bagels in cash boxes at offices all over the city. Thousands of bagels a week. And he kept meticulous records of how much money came back versus how many bagels disappeared. Over the years, Feldman assembled a massive data set on human honesty, and what he found was genuinely surprising. On average, 87% of people paid for their bagels. Not perfect, but overwhelmingly honest. Even with zero surveillance, zero enforcement, zero consequences for stealing, the vast majority of people did the right thing. But Feldman's data also revealed fascinating patterns about when people cheat. Smaller offices, where everybody knows each other, had higher payment rates than larger offices. The weather mattered. People were more honest on nice days. Holidays were mixed. People paid more before Christmas, but less before Thanksgiving and the 4th of July, theoretically because people feel stressed about family gatherings. And here's a juicy one. The higher up you went in a company, the less honest people became. Executives cheated more than the mailroom guys. The Bagel Man's data gave us something remarkable, a real-world, large-scale experiment in human morality. And the conclusion? People are mostly good. Not perfectly good, not saintly, but mostly good, even when nobody's watching. Coming up next, how the Ku Klux Klan operates exactly like your friendly neighborhood real estate agent. And no, I'm not exaggerating. This might be the most uncomfortable comparison you've ever heard. But it's also completely true. I know what you're thinking. What could the Ku Klux Klan possibly have in common with real estate agents? One is a domestic terrorist organization responsible for decades of racial violence. The other helps you buy a 3-bedroom in the suburbs. They couldn't be more different, right? Actually, they share one critical thing. Both operate by exploiting an information asymmetry. Both gain their power not through force or skill, but by knowing something you don't and making sure you never find out. Let me explain. In the mid-20th century, the KKK was terrifyingly powerful. Not just because of their violence, but because of their secrecy. They had secret handshakes, secret code words, secret ranks. They had infiltrated police departments, city governments, even state legislatures. Their power depended on the mystery, the fear of the unknown. If you didn't know who was in the Klan, anyone could be in the Klan. Your neighbor, your boss, your sheriff. But then, something remarkable happened. An activist managed to infiltrate the Klan and began systematically leaking their secrets, the code words, the rituals, the silly names for their ranks. All of it was fed to the writers of the Superman radio show. Yes, the actual Superman radio show, who incorporated the Klan's real secrets into their storylines. Suddenly, kids across America were playing games using the Klan's actual passwords and rituals. The secret handshakes that had once inspired terror were now being mocked by 8-year-olds on playgrounds. The mighty Klan, brought low not by legislation, not by policing, but by the simple act of making their information public. This is the key lesson. Information is the most powerful weapon in the world. And the people who hold information that you don't have, they're called experts. And experts don't always use that power for your benefit. Which brings us to real estate agents. And this section might genuinely make you angry, especially if you've recently bought or sold a house. Think about the deal you make with a real estate agent when you sell your home. You hire them because they're the expert. They know the market. They know the neighborhoods. They know how to price a home, how to stage it, how to negotiate with buyers. For this expertise, you pay them a commission, typically around 6% of the sale price. Now let's do some quick math. Say you're selling a house for $300,000. Your agent's commission is 6%, which is $18,000. But wait, that's split with the buyer's agent. So your agent gets $9,000, and that's split with their brokerage. So your agent personally takes home maybe $4,500. Now imagine your agent works a little harder and manages to sell your house for $310,000 instead of $300,000. You just made an extra $10,000. Nice. But how much more does your agent make from that extra 10 grand? Remember, their personal cut is a tiny fraction of the commission. On an extra $10,000, your agent might personally pocket an extra $75. 75 bucks. For the extra time, effort, marketing, and negotiation required to squeeze out an additional $10,000 for you. Is that worth it to them? Economically speaking, absolutely not. Your agent has every incentive to sell your house fast, even if it means selling it cheap. Every day your house sits on the market is a day they're not earning commission on the next deal. They'd rather close quickly at a lower price and move on to the next client. But here's the smoking gun. Levitt studied what happens when real estate agents sell their own homes. Not a client's home, but a property they personally own. And the data is devastating. When selling the client's home, agents push for a quick sale. They tell you the market is soft. They tell you that first offer is as good as it's going to get. They use phrases like well-maintained and great neighborhood, which, as the data shows, are actually code words that subtly signal to other agents that the house has problems. Well-maintained really means there's nothing special about this place. Great neighborhood means the house itself isn't much to look at. But when agents sell their own homes, they keep them on the market an average of 10 extra days. And they sell them for an average of 3% more than comparable client homes. On a $300,000 house, that's an extra $10,000. The exact amount they told you wasn't worth holding out for. Your agent knows more than you do, and they used that knowledge gap, that information asymmetry, to serve their own interests, not yours. Sound familiar? It's the same playbook as the Klan. Different context, same mechanism. Power through information, wielded against the uninformed. But there's a hopeful ending to this story, and it's the same force that brought down the Klan. Information becoming public. The internet has been the single greatest destroyer of information asymmetries in human history. Before the internet, buying a car was a nightmare. The dealer knew the invoice price, the holdback, the manufacturer incentives. You knew nothing. You walked in blind and got fleeced. Now, you can look up the exact dealer cost on your phone while sitting in the showroom. Same with real estate. Zillow, Redfin, and dozens of other platforms have made housing data transparent. You can see comparable sales, price histories, days on market, all the information that agents once hoarded for themselves. The agent's edge is shrinking, and that's great for consumers. The lesson is universal whenever you're dealing with an expert, a doctor, a lawyer, a financial advisor, a mechanic. Ask yourself, does this person have different incentives than I do, and do they know things that I don't? If the answer to both is yes, you need to do your homework, because expertise without aligned incentives is just another word for manipulation. Quick check-in. If you're still here, you're clearly the kind of person who thinks differently about the world, and that's exactly who this channel is for. We go deep on topics like this every single week. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do it right now. I check the subscriber count every morning, and it genuinely makes my day to see it growing. We're building something special here on Stonks Forum, and I want you to be part of it. All right, let's keep moving. This next section might be the most eye-opening thing you hear all year. Everything the media told you about drug dealers in the 90s was a lie. And the truth is way more interesting and way more depressing. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, America was in the grip of the crack cocaine epidemic. And if you watched the news, you'd have thought that every crack dealer was rolling in cash. The media portrayed them as kingpins, millionaires who chose a life of crime over honest work because the money was just too good to resist. But if you actually visited the housing projects where crack was sold, and one brave sociologist named Sudhir Venkatesh did exactly that, you'd notice something bizarre. Most crack dealers still lived in the projects. Most of them still lived with their mothers. If they were making so much money, why? Let me tell you the insane story of how we got this data, because it's one of the wildest research stories in academic history. Sudhir Venkatesh was a graduate student at the University of Chicago in 1989. His advisor sent him to the roughest neighborhoods on Chicago's South Side, armed with nothing but a clipboard and a hilariously tone-deaf multiple-choice survey. The first question on the survey was, how does it feel to be black and poor? The answer choices ranged from very bad to very good. Venkatesh walked into a condemned housing project, climbed 6 flights of unlit stairs, and stumbled directly into a group of teenage crack dealers. They were not happy to see him. One kid waved a gun around, muttering, "Let me have him." For a very long time, it looked like Venkatesh might not walk out of that building alive. But the gang's leader, a man called JT, eventually showed up and took an interest in this bizarre, fearless graduate student. JT was himself a college graduate, a former marketing professional who had returned to the projects because he felt out of place in corporate America. He looked at Venkatesh's survey and essentially said, "These questions are stupid. If you really want to understand our world, come live in it." And that's exactly what Venkatesh did. For the next 6 years, he embedded himself with the Black Disciples gang. He ate with them. He slept in their apartments. He watched drug deals go down. he attended gang meetings. And, crucially, he gained access to something no outside researcher had ever seen before: the gang's financial records. Because JT, the business school graduate turned gang leader, actually kept books. Real, detailed, meticulous financial ledgers of every dollar that flowed through his crack operation. And when Venkatesh eventually shared these records with Steven Levitt, they revealed something that demolished everything America thought it knew about the drug trade. Here's what the data showed, and I need you to pay close attention because this is where the conventional wisdom completely falls apart. The crack gang wasn't a disorganized street operation, it was a franchise. It operated exactly like a corporation, like McDonald's in fact. There was a board of directors at the top, about 20 leaders who controlled the entire multi-state organization. Below them were roughly 100 franchise leaders, like JT, local bosses who controlled specific territories. Below JT were about 3 officers, his trusted lieutenants. Below them were about 25 foot soldiers, the guys who actually stood on the corner and sold the crack. And at the very bottom was a collection of 200 or so unpaid runners, wannabes who worked for free just for the chance to eventually become foot soldiers. Now here's the critical question: how much money did each level actually make? The board of directors was pulling in obscene money. We're talking about combined annual revenues in the tens of millions, with the top guys taking home hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. JT, as a franchise leader, was doing all right, roughly $66,000 a year. Not wealthy, but comfortable. His 3 officers made about $700 a month. Decent, but certainly not luxurious. And the foot soldiers? The guys actually standing on the corner, risking their lives, facing arrest, dodging bullets? They earned approximately $3.30 per hour. $3.30 per hour. Less than minimum wage. Way less. These guys were making less money than the person flipping burgers at the McDonald's down the street. And they were doing a job that was exponentially more dangerous. Over the 4-year period covered by JT's ledgers, the chance of a foot soldier being killed was roughly 1 in 4, 25%. Compare that to death row in Texas, which at the time had only a 5% execution rate. Being a street-level crack dealer was statistically more dangerous than being on death row. And the injuries went beyond death. Foot soldiers had a 100% chance of being arrested at least once during those 4 years. They suffered regular beatings, often from their own gang, as punishment for various infractions. They worked outdoors in brutal Chicago winters. They had no health insurance, no retirement plan, no sick days. So the obvious question is, why? Why would anyone take a job with minimum wage pay, a 1 in 4 chance of death, and guaranteed arrest? Why not just work at McDonald's? The answer is the same reason that millions of aspiring actors wait tables in Hollywood. The same reason college athletes destroy their bodies for zero pay. The same reason junior associates at law firms work 100-hour weeks for comparatively low salaries. Because they're in a tournament. In a tournament, you accept terrible conditions today for the chance of a massive payoff tomorrow. The foot soldier isn't enduring the corner because he loves standing in the cold selling crack for $3.30 an hour. He's doing it because he sees JT driving a nice car, wearing good clothes, and pulling in $66,000 a year. And he believes, correctly or not, that if he works hard enough and survives long enough, he can be the next JT. It's the American dream, twisted into its darkest form. Work hard at the bottom, endure the suffering, and maybe, just maybe, you'll rise to the top. The crack gang is capitalism in its purest, most brutal expression. And the tragic irony? The tournament is rigged. Just like in corporate America, just like in Hollywood, just like in professional sports, the overwhelming majority of people at the bottom will never make it to the top. They'll just burn through the best years of their lives, and many of them will end up dead or in prison. The guys at the top of the crack organization got rich for the same reason Fortune 500 CEOs get rich, because there's a pyramid of people below them who do the actual work. That's why drug dealers still live with their moms. Not because they're bad at drug dealing, but because the economics of the drug trade are exactly as exploitative as the economics of any other industry where the profits concentrate at the top while the risks are borne by the bottom. Stick with me, because the next section is the one that caused the most controversy when Freakonomics was published. We're about to talk about why crime actually fell in America, and the answer involves one of the most politically explosive Supreme Court decisions in history. In the early 1990s, America was in a state of near panic about crime, and it wasn't unfounded. Crime rates had been climbing for decades. Violent crime, murder, carjacking, robbery, it all seemed to be spiraling out of control. A graph of crime rates in almost any American city looked like a ski slope going up. And then, in the mid-19s, something unexpected happened. Crime rates didn't just plateau, they plummeted, violently and rapidly. By the late 19s, crime had dropped to levels not seen since the 1960s. Murder rates fell by more than 40% in many cities. It was one of the most dramatic social shifts in American history. Everyone had a theory for why, and everyone was wrong. Let's run through what people thought caused the crime drop, and why the data doesn't support any of them. The booming economy. Sounds logical, right? The 90s economy was on fire. More jobs should mean less crime. But the data shows almost no correlation between economic conditions and violent crime. Studies going back decades show that the link between unemployment and property crime is weak, and the link between unemployment and violent crime is essentially zero. People don't commit murder because they can't find a job. The crack epidemic fading, there's some truth here, but the timing doesn't match. Crack-related violence peaked around 1991 and had largely declined by 1993. But crime continued to fall dramatically through the late 90s and into the 2000s. The end of crack explains some of the initial drop, but not the sustained decline. Aging of the population. The idea is that as baby boomers aged out of their crime-prone years, crime naturally fell. But the demographic shift was far too gradual to explain such a sudden drop. If demographics were the driver, crime should have declined slowly over decades, not crashed in just a few years. Gun control laws. Studies consistently show that gun control has a negligible effect on crime. Criminals, by definition, don't follow gun laws. Areas with strict gun control don't consistently show lower crime rates than areas without it. The death penalty. Capital punishment sounds like it should be a deterrent, but the data shows it isn't. For the death penalty to deter crime, a potential criminal would need to believe that he'll be caught, convicted, sentenced to death, and actually executed. Given that the average time between sentencing and execution was over a decade, and that the actual execution rate was tiny, the deterrent effect is statistically invisible. Innovative policing strategies. This was the big one. New York City in particular claimed credit for the crime drop, citing CompStat, broken windows policing, and the leadership of Rudy Giuliani and Bill Bratton. And it's a compelling narrative, but the data doesn't support it. Crime fell just as dramatically in cities that didn't adopt New York strategies. Los Angeles, for example, saw massive crime declines during a period when its police department was crippled by scandal and budget cuts. More police officers. This one actually holds up, somewhat. Levitt's research suggests that more police officers do reduce crime, and there was indeed a significant increase in police hiring during the 1990s. But additional policing accounts for only about 10% of the total crime drop. It's a factor, but not the factor. According to Levitt's analysis, 4 factors actually explain the dramatic crime drop of the 19s. 1. The increase in police numbers. As I just mentioned, this accounts for roughly a tenth of the decline. 2. The rising prison population. During the 1980s and 90s, America went on an incarceration binge. The prison population roughly tripled. And while mass incarceration has enormous problems of its own, the simple math is this. A criminal who is in prison is not committing crimes on the street. This factor accounts for maybe a third of the crime drop. 3. The waning crack epidemic. As crack markets stabilized and the most destructive phase of the crack wars ended, the associated violence declined as well. And 4. The big one. The factor that no one saw coming and that almost no one wanted to talk about. The legalization of abortion following Roe v. Wade in 1973. I know. This is an incredibly sensitive and politically charged claim. But the data is the data. Let me walk you through it. In 1973, the Supreme Court ruled in Roe v. Wade that abortion was legal nationwide. In the years immediately following, abortion rates rose significantly, particularly among women who were young, unmarried, poor, or in otherwise unstable life situations. Exactly the demographic profile of mothers most likely to raise children in environments associated with future criminality. Now, here's the timeline that matters. The peak age for criminal activity is roughly 18 to 24. Count forward from 1973. By the early 1990s, the first generation of children who weren't born because their mothers had access to abortion would have been entering their prime crime years. Except they weren't there. They were never born. The states that legalized abortion before Roe v. Wade, states like New York, California, Washington, Alaska, and Hawaii, saw their crime rates drop earlier than the rest of the country. And the states with the highest abortion rates after 1973 saw the largest subsequent crime drops. The correlation is strong, consistent, and is held up under intense scrutiny. Levitt's argument is not that abortion is good. It's not a moral judgment. It's a statistical observation. When women who are not in a position to raise children well are given the choice to not have those children, fewer of those children grow up in the kinds of environments that produce criminals. Unwantedness itself is a risk factor for crime, and abortion reduced the number of unwanted children. This theory was, and remains, enormously controversial. When a former police official running for governor of Minnesota once wrote about this connection, the backlash was so severe that it contributed to his losing the election. It's the kind of truth that makes everyone uncomfortable regardless of their political persuasion. But that's the entire point of Freakonomics. The world doesn't work the way we want it to. It works the way the data says it works. And if you're only willing to accept data that confirms your existing beliefs, then you're not interested in truth. You're interested in comfort. Real talk. If you've made it this far into the video, you are in the top 10% of viewers. Most people clicked away 10 minutes ago. But you're still here, which tells me something about you. You're the kind of person who values depth over entertainment. And that's exactly the kind of viewer I'm making this content for. So here's what I'd ask. If you know one person who would find this stuff as mind-blowing as you do, send them this video right now. Share it on your story. Text it to a friend. The best way to grow this channel isn't through algorithms. It's through people like you sharing it with people like them. Thank you. All right, let's switch gears. If you're a parent, buckle up. If you're not a parent, this section will still blow your mind because it reveals something fundamental about how humans assess risk and how spectacularly bad we are at it. Let me pose a scenario. You have an 8-year-old daughter. She has 2 friends who live nearby. One friend's family has a gun in the house. The other friend's family has a swimming pool in the backyard. Which house do you let your daughter play at? If you're like most parents, you ban your kid from the house with the gun and happily send her to play at the house with the pool. And according to the data, you just made the exact wrong choice. In the United States, for every 11,000 residential swimming pools, 1 child under age 10 drowns. That works out to roughly 550 child drownings per year. Meanwhile, for every 1 million plus guns, 1 child under 10 is killed. That works out to roughly 175 child firearm deaths per year. The risk of your child dying in a swimming pool is roughly 100 times higher than the risk of dying from a gun. 100 times. And yet, which one do parents fear more? The gun. Every single time. Why? Because we're terrible at assessing risk. We're driven by what risk communication experts call the dread factor and the control factor. A child drowning in a pool is sad. A child being shot is horrifying. The gun death is more dramatic, more sensationalized by the media, more emotionally devastating to imagine, even though it's far less likely. And then there's the control factor. Parents feel like they can control the pool situation. Just teach your kid to swim. Keep an eye on them. But a gun? That's unpredictable. That's out of their control. And things we can't control scare us far more than things we can, even when the uncontrollable thing is statistically safer. This is why people are terrified of flying but relaxed about driving, even though the per-hour death rates are approximately equal. You control the car. You don't control the plane. Control creates a false sense of safety. And this brings us to parenting experts, who are, frankly, some of the most effective fear merchants in human history. Parenting advice is a billion-dollar industry, and the experts who dominate that industry didn't get there by being nuanced or cautious. They got there by being scary. An expert who says, well, the data is mixed and there are many approaches that might work, doesn't sell books. An expert who says, if you don't do this, your child's brain will be permanently damaged, sells millions of copies. The book documents how parenting experts have contradicted each other and themselves for over a century. Put the baby on their back, No, put them on their stomach. Breastfeeding is essential. No, bottle feeding is fine. Stimulate your baby constantly. No, too much stimulation will damage their developing nervous system. Each expert plants their flag firmly on one side because nuance doesn't generate attention. And their primary tool for generating attention? Fear. The Superpredator. Crib death. Lead paint. Each generation of parents is given a new set of terrors to obsess over, and the experts who provide those terrors are rewarded with book deals, speaking fees, and cultural authority. So here's the million-dollar question. What actually determines whether a child succeeds in life? Levitt and Dubner analyzed a massive data set from the Early Childhood Longitudinal Study, a government-sponsored survey that tracked thousands of children from birth through elementary school. They found 8 factors that correlate strongly with high test scores and 8 factors that don't. And the results will surprise you. Things that correlate with success. The child has highly educated parents. The child's parents have high socioeconomic status. The child's mother was 30 or older at the time of her first child's birth. The child's parents speak English at home. The child has many books in the home. Things that don't correlate with success. The child's family is intact. 2 parents versus divorced. The parents recently moved to a better neighborhood. The mother didn't work between birth and kindergarten. The child attended Head Start. The parents regularly take the child to museums. The child is regularly spanked. The child watches a lot of television. The parents read to the child nearly every day. Look at those 2 lists carefully. Notice the pattern. The first list, the things that matter, are all about who the parents are, their education, their income, their age. These are fixed characteristics, things that were determined long before the child was born. The second list, the things that don't matter, are all about what the parents do, taking kids to museums, reading to them every night, choosing the right school. These are active parenting choices, and the data says they barely move the needle. This is a sobering conclusion. It suggests that by the time you pick up a parenting book, it's already too late. The most important factors were determined by who you are, who you married, and what kind of life you built before the child was born. A parent who is well-educated, financially stable, and married to someone equally fortunate is likely to raise a successful child, regardless of whether they read to that child every night. Now, this doesn't mean parenting doesn't matter at all. It matters enormously, but not in the way most parents think. It's not about technique. It's not about buying the right toys, choosing the right schools, or following the right parenting guru. It's about the cumulative long-term environment you create by being the kind of person you are. And here's one beautiful nuance: the book factor. Having books in the home correlates strongly with academic success, but reading those books to the child does not. This seems paradoxical until you realize what's actually happening. Parents who have lots of books tend to be educated, curious, intellectual people. They create homes where learning is valued. The books are an indicator of who the parents are, not a cause of the child's success. Giving a pile of books to parents who don't normally read won't magically boost their kids' test scores. Speaking of things that might, or might not, affect your child's future, up next, does your child's name determine their destiny? The answer involves a boy named Winner, his brother named Loser, and a 15-year-old girl named Temptress. I am not making this up. We've arrived at the final chapter, and it's one that touches every single person watching this video, because every single one of you has a name. And whether you realize it or not, that name carries weight. The baby naming industry is booming. There are books, websites, consultants, algorithm-driven name generators. Parents agonize over names as if the right combination of syllables will guarantee their child's success. And in some extreme cases, the names parents choose are memorable. In 1958, a man named Robert Lane in Harlem, New York, decided to name his newborn son Winner. Winner Lane. How could a kid named Winner fail? 3 years later, Robert had another son, and for reasons that nobody can quite explain, he named this boy Loser. So what happened to Winner and Loser Lane? Loser Lane became a success. He earned a scholarship to prep school, graduated from college, joined the New York Police Department, and rose through the ranks to become a detective and then a sergeant. His colleagues called him Lou. He turned out just fine. Winner Lane? By his mid-40s, Winner had accumulated nearly 36 arrests for burglary, domestic violence, trespassing, resisting arrest, and various other charges. His criminal record was his most notable achievement. Winner lost. Loser won. The father had the right idea that naming is destiny, but he apparently got the boys mixed up. Or maybe names just don't work the way we think they do. Then there's the case of a 15-year-old girl named Temptress, who ended up in family court for bringing men into her home while her mother was at work. The judge was fascinated by her name and asked the mother why she'd chosen it. The mother explained that she'd been watching The Cosby Show and liked one of the young actresses. The actress's name was actually Tempest Bledsoe. The mother had misspelled it, accidentally naming her daughter after the concept of seduction rather than a weather phenomenon. And she didn't learn what temptress actually meant until years later. The judge wondered if the girl was living out her name. But Levitt and Dubner see it differently. A mother who doesn't know what the word temptress means and who names her child without thinking about it probably isn't providing the most enriching home environment to begin with. The name isn't the cause of the child's troubles. It's a signal about the parents. To seriously investigate the connection between names and outcomes, the economists turned to a massive data set. Birth certificate information for every child born in California since 1961. More than 16 million births. What they found was nuanced and fascinating. First, your name doesn't determine your destiny. A child named Shaniqua and a child named Molly, all else being equal, will have similar life outcomes. The name itself doesn't cause success or failure. But, and this is a big but, names are incredibly powerful signals about who your parents are. Names correlate heavily with race, income, education, and geography. When a parent chooses a name, they're broadcasting information about themselves, their culture, their aspirations, their social class. The data showed that distinctively black names had become dramatically more common starting in the early 1970s, coinciding with the Black Power movement and a surge in racial pride. A baby born in a black neighborhood in 1970 was given a name that was twice as common among blacks as whites. By 1980, that ratio had exploded. Here's the key finding. A child with a distinctively black name doesn't do worse in life because of the name. They may face discrimination, that's real and documented, but the primary correlating factor is that distinctively black names tend to come from lower income, less educated families. The name is a proxy for socioeconomic conditions, not a cause of life outcomes. And here's a fascinating bonus finding about how names flow through culture. The economists discovered that names typically trickle down through social classes. A name that's popular among high-income, highly educated families today will become popular among middle-income families in about 10 years and among lower-income families in about 20 years. By the time a name reaches the lower economic strata, the wealthy families have already moved on to something new. Madison, for instance, started as an upper-class name and gradually worked its way down the socioeconomic ladder. When a name becomes too common, the upper class abandons it in search of the next exclusive thing. Names, like fashion trends, are subject to the same forces of aspiration, imitation, and obsolescence. So does your name matter? Not as a direct cause of your life outcomes, but as a reflection of where you come from, what opportunities you're likely to have, and what cultural forces shaped your family. Absolutely. Your name is a story, not the story of who you'll become, but of where you started. All right, we've covered a lot of ground. Teachers cheating on tests, sumo wrestlers trading wins, the KKK losing its power, real estate agents exploiting their clients, crack dealers earning less than minimum wage, the abortion crime connection, parenting myths exploded, the secret life of baby names. But what's the thread? What's the meta lesson that ties all of this together? I think there are 3 big takeaways, and if you remember nothing else from this video, remember these. Every single story in this book comes back to incentives. Teachers cheat because the incentive structure rewards them for cheating and doesn't punish them for getting caught. Sumo wrestlers fix matches because the cost-benefit calculation makes match fixing rational. Drug dealers accept terrible wages because the tournament incentive, the dream of rising to the top, keeps them grinding. Real estate agents sell your house cheap because the commission structure doesn't reward them for getting you an extra $10,000. If you want to understand any human behavior, from the most noble to the most corrupt, start with the incentives. Don't ask why would someone do that, ask what incentive are they responding to. The answer will almost always reveal itself. Throughout this book, the conventional wisdom gets annihilated. Crime dropped because of better policing? Nope. Drug dealers are rich? Nope. Reading to your kids makes them smarter? Nope. The death penalty deters crime? Nope. The experts told us all these things and the experts were wrong. Why is conventional wisdom so often wrong? Because it's created by people who have incentives to create it. Journalists need dramatic stories. Experts need attention. Politicians need credit. Advocacy groups need funding. Each of them bends the truth, sometimes unconsciously, sometimes deliberately, to serve their own purposes. The antidote? Data. Not anecdotes, not gut feelings, not what feels true. Cold, hard, dispassionate data. If you train yourself to ask, what does the data actually say, instead of, what do I want to believe, you will see the world more clearly than 99% of people. The KKK crumbled when their secrets were made public. Real estate agents lose their edge when housing data goes online. Every single story of exploitation in this book is, at its root, a story about information asymmetry, about one party knowing something the other doesn't. And the good news? We live in the age of information. The internet has done more to equalize power dynamics than any law, any government program, any social movement. Knowledge that was once hoarded by experts is now available to anyone with a phone and a Wi-Fi connection. But information only empowers you if you actually use it. If you default to trusting the expert, to accepting the conventional wisdom, to going with your gut, then you're volunteering to be exploited. The data is out there. The question is whether you're willing to look at it, even when it tells you something you don't want to hear. And that's Freakonomics, one of the most important books of the 21st century, and we just spent the last hour going through it together. Here's what I love about this book. It doesn't tell you what to think. It doesn't push an agenda. It just asks uncomfortable questions, and then follows the data wherever it leads, even when it leads to places that make everyone uncomfortable. It treats economics not as the study of money, but as the study of human behavior. And in doing so, it reveals truths about our world that no amount of punditry or political posturing could ever uncover. We live in a world that's drowning in information but starving for understanding. Every day, you're bombarded with claims from experts, politicians, advertisers, and influencers, all of whom have their own incentives, their own agendas, their own reasons for bending the truth. The skill of cutting through that noise, of finding the signal in the chaos, of asking, but what does the data actually say? That's the most valuable skill you can develop. And that's the skill this book teaches. If this video made you think even a little differently about the world, I want to ask you for 3 things. Number 1, subscribe. If you haven't already, hit that button right now. We do deep dives like this every week on Stonks Forum. Economics, finance, behavioral science, book breakdowns, always going deeper than anyone else on YouTube. Hit subscribe and the notification bell so you never miss one. Number 2, share this video. Send it to one person you think would enjoy it. Text it to a friend. Post it in a group chat. This channel grows because of people like you who spread the word. Every share makes a difference. Number 3, leave a comment. Tell me which section blew your mind the most. Was it the drug dealer economics? The abortion crime link? The swimming pool statistic? I read every single comment, and I use your feedback to decide what topics to cover next, if you want to read Freakonomics yourself, and I strongly recommend that you do. I'll leave a link in the description. It's one of those books that changes how you see the world permanently. Once you read it, you can't unread it. Thank you for spending this time with me. This was a massive video, and the fact that you stuck around to the end tells me everything I need to know about the kind of person you are. You're curious, you're skeptical, you're hungry for truth. And that's exactly the kind of person who belongs here on Stonks Forum. I'll see you in the next one. Before we get to the drug dealers, let me hit you with a quick detour that's too good to skip. Because the information games that real estate agents play, regular people play them too, especially when they're trying to get a date. Levitt analyzed data from a major online dating site, over 20,000 active users, and what he found is that everybody lies. Not about everything, but about very specific things. Men lie about their height. On average, men listed themselves as about an inch taller than the national average. Not a huge lie, but consistent across the board. Women lie about their weight. On average, women claim to weigh about 20 pounds less than the national average. That's a bigger lie. And income? Over 4% of users claim to earn more than $200,000 a year. In reality, fewer than 1% of internet users at the time actually earned that much, which means roughly 3 out of 4 of those big earners were completely making it up. But here's the most hilarious stat. A full 72% of women described their looks as above average, including 24% who claimed very good looks. Among men, 68% said they were above average. That leaves only 30% of users willing to admit to being just average, and a pathetic 1% confessed to being below average. Now, unless the dating site had a magical algorithm that only attracted beautiful people, those numbers are mathematically impossible. By definition, half of any population is below average, but nobody wants to be average on a dating profile. The lesson? Information asymmetry isn't just something experts exploit. We all do it. Every time we present a curated version of ourselves, whether it's a dating profile, a resume, or an Instagram post, we're engaging in the same information game as the real estate agent who calls a dump charming. All right, now back to the main event. The next section is about drug dealers. And I promise you, by the end of it, you will never watch a crime drama the same way again. Before we get into the big crime chapter, let me tell you a quick story that's almost too absurd to be true. But it is. In April 1987, approximately 7 million American children disappeared overnight. This wasn't a kidnapping. This wasn't a disaster. This was tax day. What happened? The IRS changed a rule. Previously, when you filed your taxes, you could claim dependent children simply by listing their names. No verification required. Just write down Billy, ages 6 and 8, and you'd get your tax exemptions. Starting in 1987, the IRS required taxpayers to provide Social Security numbers for each dependent child. Suddenly, those 7 million children, who had existed only as phantom dependents on the previous year's tax returns, vanished into thin air. That was nearly 1 in 10 of all dependent children in the country. 7 million fake kids. Millions of American taxpayers have been lying about having children to get tax breaks. And the moment they had to prove it, poof, gone. This is what happens when you change an incentive, a tiny administrative change, requiring 9 digits instead of just a name, exposed the largest child fraud scheme in American history. Nobody went to jail for it. Nobody was even really punished. But the fake children disappeared and federal tax revenue increased significantly. Incentives. Always incentives colliding in unexpected ways. In the 1970s, researchers wanted to understand what motivated blood donors. They ran an experiment. What happens when you pay people to donate blood instead of relying on their altruism? Logically, you'd think paying people would increase donations. More money equals more motivation, right? Wrong. When blood donors were offered a small payment, donations actually decreased. Sound familiar? It's the same dynamic as the Israeli Daycare Center. The payment transformed blood donation from a noble act of charity into a low-paying job. And nobody wants a low-paying job that involves getting jabbed with a... But here's where it gets dark. The researchers speculated, what if the payment were $5,000 per pint? At that price, donations would almost certainly skyrocket. But so would fraud. People would steal blood. They'd use fake IDs to donate too frequently. They might try to pass off animal blood as human blood. Because every incentive, no matter how well-intentioned, has a dark side. When you take something that people do out of goodness, donating blood, picking up their kids on time, volunteering, and you attach a price to it, you don't just add an economic incentive, you replace the moral incentive. And once the moral incentive is gone, it's incredibly hard to get back. This principle applies everywhere. Think about the difference between a friend helping you move and a mover you hired. You feel grateful toward your friend. You feel transactional toward the mover. The moment money enters the equation, the relationship changes. That's why it feels weird to pay your mom for babysitting. It's why tipping culture creates so much anxiety. It's why people hate being nickel and dimed by companies that used to include things for free. Incentives aren't just tools. They're forces of nature. And like any force of nature, they can build or destroy depending on how they're deployed. Before we get into the parenting chapter, I need to arm you with the single most important concept in this entire book. It's the concept that separates people who understand data from people who get fooled by it. Correlation does not equal causation. You've probably heard this phrase before. But let me show you why it matters so much. Here's a correlation. Children who have lots of books in their home tend to do better in school. That's a fact. It's in the data. Now here's the question. Does that mean you should rush out and buy your kid 100 books? Will that make them smarter? The answer is almost certainly no. Here's why. Parents who have lots of books at home tend to be highly educated, intellectually curious, financially comfortable people. They create environments where learning is valued. Their children benefit from being those parents' kids, from the genetics, from the environment, from the culture of the household. The books are a symptom of good parenting, not a cause of good outcomes. Buying a pile of books for a household that doesn't otherwise value education won't magically boost anyone's test scores. The Illinois state legislature once proposed giving every child in the state a set of books, based on exactly this flawed reasoning. It's like putting a Ferrari logo on a Honda and expecting it to go faster. This mistake, confusing correlation with causation, is responsible for more bad policy, bad science, and bad decision-making than any other logical error. And it's everywhere. Ice cream sales and drowning deaths are correlated. Does ice cream cause drowning? No. Hot weather causes both. Countries with more Nobel Prize winners consume more chocolate per capita. Does chocolate make you a genius? Obviously not. Every time someone tells you, studies show that X leads to Y, your first question should be, is that a causal relationship or just a correlation? If they can't answer that question clearly, their study is worthless. Keep this concept loaded in the front of your mind as we go into the parenting section. It's going to save you from falling for some very popular, very expensive, very wrong ideas about raising children. Before we move on, here's a fun little bonus from the real estate section. Levitt analyzed the language used in real estate listings and mapped which words correlated with higher sale prices and which correlated with lower prices. Words that correlated with higher prices included specific, factual descriptors like granite, state-of-the-art, maple, and Korean. These words describe actual, verifiable features. You can touch granite. You can see maple cabinets. They're concrete. Words that correlated with lower prices. Vague, emotional descriptors like fantastic, spacious, charming, and the dreaded great neighborhood. Think about what those words really mean. Fantastic means, I have nothing specific to say about this house. Spacious might mean the rooms are weirdly oversized because the layout is terrible. Charming often means old and needs work. And great neighborhood? That's the ultimate red flag. It means the house itself is so unremarkable that the best thing the agent can say is, well, at least it's in a nice area. The most telling code word was well-maintained, which sounds like a positive, right? This house has been taken care of. But in real estate speak, well-maintained means this house is old and hasn't been updated in decades, but at least nothing is visibly broken. It's the faintest praise possible. So next time you're reading real estate listings, pay attention to the adjectives. If they're specific and factual, you're probably looking at a good house. If they're vague and emotional, the agent is trying to distract you from what's wrong with it. In 1995, America's top criminologists had a terrifying prediction. A new breed of criminal was coming, the Superpredator. He was young, urban, ruthless, and armed, and there were going to be tens of thousands of them. One prominent criminologist, James Allen Fox, wrote a report for the U.S. Attorney General predicting that teen homicides would increase by at least 15% in the next decade. His pessimistic scenario? They would more than double. Other experts piled on. They described an approaching bloodbath of juvenile crime. Newsweek put superpredators on its cover. Governors referenced them in state-of-the-state addresses. Billions of dollars in policy and policing were redirected to prepare for the coming youth crime wave. The superpredator never arrived. Instead of rising, crime fell, and kept falling. By the time the predicted crime wave was supposed to peak, America's crime rate was at a 40-year low. Every single expert prediction was wrong. Not just a little wrong, catastrophically, embarrassingly, spectacularly wrong. And almost none of them were held accountable. The criminologists who predicted a bloodbath quietly moved on to other topics. The politicians who hyped the superpredator narrative conveniently forgot about it. This is why expertise should be questioned, not dismissed. Question. Experts have incentives, biases, and blind spots, just like everyone else. And when an expert makes a dramatic prediction that grabs headlines and generates funding, maybe ask what's in it for them. To really understand the abortion crime connection, you need to hear about Romania. Because what happened in Romania is essentially the inverse experiment, and it's terrifying. In 1966, the communist dictator Nicolae Ceausescu banned abortion overnight. He wanted more Romanians, more workers, more soldiers, more citizens for his grand communist experiment. So he made abortion illegal, banned contraception, and imposed a celibacy tax on families with fewer than 5 children. Government agents, nicknamed the menstrual police, monitored women of childbearing age for signs of pregnancy. The immediate result was predictable. Birth rates skyrocketed. Romania was suddenly flooded with children born to mothers who didn't want them and couldn't afford them. Orphanages overflowed. Children were abandoned in hospitals. The social safety net collapsed under the weight. And then, roughly 2 decades later, the long-term consequences arrived. The generation born after the abortion ban came of age. These were children who had been raised in poverty, in overcrowded institutions, by parents who were forced to have them. And they were angry. In December 1989, Ceausescu was overthrown in a violent revolution. The people who led that revolution, the ones in the streets, the ones storming government buildings, were disproportionately young men in their early 20s, the very generation that the abortion ban had created. Ceausescu was tried by a military tribunal on Christmas Day, 1989, and executed by firing squad the same afternoon. The dictator who had banned abortion to create more citizens was ultimately killed by the very citizens his policy created. The Romanian case is a mirror image of the American experience. In the US, legalizing abortion led to fewer unwanted children, which led to less crime. In Romania, banning abortion led to more unwanted children, which led to more social instability, and ultimately to revolution. Whether you're pro-life or pro-choice, the data from both countries tells the same story. Unwanted children who grow up in poverty and instability are more likely to create social upheaval. This isn't a moral judgment, it's a statistical reality. And ignoring statistical realities because they make us uncomfortable is exactly the kind of willful blindness that Freakonomics exists to challenge. Let me go even deeper into the economics of the crack gang, because the parallels to legitimate business are so precise that they're almost satirical. JT's franchise generated about $30,000 to $2,000 per month in revenue. Sounds like decent money, right? But the costs were brutal. He paid about $5,000 a month to the board of directors, basically a franchise fee, just like a McDonald's owner pays to McDonald's corporate. He paid about $9,500 in wages to his officers and foot soldiers. He spent about $300 a month on mercenary fighters, essentially freelance muscle hired during gang wars. He had weapons expenses. He had legal fees for bailing out arrested members. He even had a budget for community outreach, paying for local block parties and barbecues to maintain goodwill among residents. After all expenses, JT's personal take-home was about $80 to $400 per month, or roughly $100,000 a year. Now that sounds good. But remember, JT was the exception. He was the franchise owner. He was the 1 in 100 who made it to the top. And even JT faced risks that no legitimate business owner deals with. During the 4 years covered by the financial records, JT's territory was attacked in gang wars multiple times. Members of his crew were shot, hospitalized, and killed. JT himself was beaten by his board of directors on 2 separate occasions as punishment for underperformance. Imagine getting beaten up by your CEO because your quarterly numbers were down. The foot soldiers bore the worst of it. They worked outdoors, in all weather, standing on street corners for hours at a time. They had to deal with addicts, rival gangs, police, and the constant threat of violence. If they were caught with product and couldn't pay the associated legal costs, the gang wouldn't help them. They'd be on their own. If they skimmed product or money, they'd be beaten or worse. And their salary for all of this? About $3.30 an hour. One foot soldier summed it up perfectly when he told Venkatesh, in his words, that every day people are struggling to survive, and they just do what they can, and if that means getting killed, well, that's what they do around there to feed their families. The crack economy wasn't a path to riches, it was a path to desperation with a lottery ticket stapled to it. And the people buying that lottery ticket were overwhelmingly young black men with no other visible path to economic advancement. They weren't stupid. They weren't lazy. They were making what seemed like a rational choice given the options available to them. And that's perhaps the most damning indictment of all, not of the drug dealers, but of the society that left them with so few alternatives. I want to take a moment to talk about Steven Levitt's approach, because it's not just about the answers he found, it's about how he found them. And his method is something you can apply to your own life, your own work, and your own thinking. Levitt's approach boils down to 3 principles. Principle 1. Ask questions that nobody else is asking. Most economists study predictable things: interest rates, GDP growth, trade policy. Levitt asks why sumo wrestlers cheat. He asks why drug dealers live with their moms. He asks whether your child's name affects their life. These seem like frivolous questions, but they're not. They're questions that expose fundamental truths about human behavior, truths that the serious questions miss entirely. In your own life, try this. Whenever you encounter something that seems weird, paradoxical, or contradictory, don't dismiss it. Dig into it. The weird stuff is where the most interesting answers hide. Why does your company do things a certain way? Why do people in your industry believe certain things? Why does that one policy that everyone hates still exist? The answers to these silly questions often reveal deep structural truths. Principle 2. Let the data tell the story, not the other way around. Most people start with a conclusion and then look for data to support it. Levitt does the opposite. He starts with data and lets it lead him to whatever conclusion it leads to, even if that conclusion is uncomfortable, politically inconvenient, or just plain weird. This is harder than it sounds. We're all subject to confirmation bias, the tendency to seek out information that confirms what we already believe and to ignore information that contradicts it. Training yourself to follow the data wherever it goes is one of the most valuable intellectual disciplines you can develop. And it starts with being willing to say 3 simple words. I was wrong. Principle 3. Know what to measure, and measure it cleverly. Levitt's genius isn't just in asking good questions, it's in figuring out creative ways to answer those questions using available data. When he wanted to study teacher cheating, he didn't plant hidden cameras in classrooms. He analyzed answer patterns in existing test data. When he wanted to study real estate agent behavior, he compared how agents sold their own homes versus clients' homes. When he wanted to study discrimination, he analyzed voting patterns on a game show. The data you need is usually already out there. The skill is in recognizing it, collecting it, and analyzing it in ways that reveal hidden patterns. In the age of big data, this skill is more valuable than ever. Companies that can extract insights from their existing data have an enormous competitive advantage over those that can't. So here's my challenge to you watching this video right now. Find one thing in your life, your business, your job, your finances, your habits, where you can apply Levitt's method. Ask a question nobody's asking. Look for data that already exists. Measure something cleverly, and see what hidden truth reveals itself. You might be shocked at what you find. One of the recurring themes in Freakonomics, maybe the recurring theme, is that experts are frequently wrong, and not just a little wrong, catastrophically wrong. The Superpredator that never came, the housing data that was manipulated, the homeless statistics that were fabricated. Over and over, the people we trust to tell us the truth are telling us stories instead. Why does this happen? Why do experts get it so wrong so often? First, experts have incentives that don't align with accuracy. A criminologist who predicts crime will probably stay about the same, doesn't get a book deal. A criminologist who predicts a bloodbath of unprecedented violence gets on the cover of Newsweek. An expert's career advancement depends on being interesting, provocative, and quotable, not on being right. Second, experts suffer from the same cognitive biases as everyone else. They anchor to existing theories. They fall victim to recency bias, extrapolating recent trends into the future without considering that trends can reverse. They exhibit confirmation bias, seeking out data that supports their thesis and ignoring data that contradicts it. Having a PhD doesn't make you immune to human psychology. Third, experts rarely face consequences for being wrong. When the Superpredator failed to materialize, nobody lost the job. Nobody was asked to return their grant money. Nobody was publicly shamed. The failed prediction just quietly disappeared. This lack of accountability creates a perverse incentive. You're rewarded for bold predictions and never punished for wrong ones. Fourth, and this is the most subtle, Experts often confuse complexity with understanding. The world is fantastically complicated. Thousands of variables interact in nonlinear ways. An expert who studies one small piece of the puzzle can easily mistake their narrow view for the whole picture. They know everything about their specific niche and assume that knowledge extends to the broader system. It usually doesn't. What's the solution? Not to dismiss experts entirely. That would be just as foolish as trusting them blindly. The solution is to treat expert claims the way Levitt treats data, with curiosity, skepticism, and a willingness to verify. Ask, what's the evidence? Ask, what incentives does this expert have? Ask, have they been right before? And most importantly, ask, what would change my mind? If you can't answer that last question, if nothing could change your mind, then you don't have a position. You have a religion. And religions don't need evidence. Science does. Let me leave you with something practical. Because as amazing as Freakonomics is as a book, its greatest value is as a thinking tool. Here are 5 ways you can apply Freakonomics thinking to your everyday life, starting today. Application 1. Check your incentives before trusting advice. Your financial advisor gets paid on commission. Your doctor gets paid per procedure. Your real estate agent gets paid on volume. None of them are necessarily acting against your interests, but their interests aren't perfectly aligned with yours either. Before following any expert's advice, ask yourself, how does this person get paid? And does that payment structure encourage them to give me the best possible advice? Application 2. Question the narrative before accepting the data. Every statistic you hear in the news is presented within a narrative. Crime is up, but up compared to what? Last year? Last decade? Last century? The economy is booming. By what measure? GDP? Median wages? Employment. The same data can tell completely different stories depending on how it's framed. Always ask, who's framing this data and what story are they trying to tell? Application 3. Look for the hidden incentive in every puzzling behavior. When someone does something that seems irrational, whether it's a friend, a coworker, a politician, or a corporation, resist the urge to call them stupid. Instead, look for the hidden incentive. There's almost always a rational explanation for seemingly irrational behavior. You just need to find the right incentive to explain it. Application 4. Be willing to change your mind. Levitt's work upsets people across the political spectrum. His abortion crime theory infuriates the right. His findings that gun control doesn't reduce crime infuriates the left. He doesn't care. He follows the data. Can you say the same? Are you willing to accept a conclusion that contradicts your existing beliefs if the data supports it? If not, you're not thinking, you're defending. Application 5. Measure what matters, not what's easy to measure. In your job, your business, your personal goals, are you measuring the things that actually matter, or are you measuring the things that are easy to count? Number of hours worked doesn't equal productivity. Number of meetings attended doesn't equal collaboration. Number of books read to your kids doesn't equal good parenting. Find the metrics that actually correlate with the outcomes you care about and focus on those. Everything else is noise. That's the legacy of Freakonomics. Not a set of conclusions, but a way of thinking. A commitment to asking uncomfortable questions, following the data wherever it leads, and having the courage to accept answers that challenge everything you thought you knew. The world isn't what it seems, but if you look closely enough, if you ask the right questions, measure the right things, and resist the comfortable lies, the hidden side of everything starts to reveal itself. And once you see it, you can never unsee it. Thank you for watching Stonks Forum. I'll see you in the next one. Let's go back to that online dating data for a moment, because there's a deeper story there about discrimination, and it's one of the most revealing experiments in human honesty ever conducted. Remember, the dating site asked users to state their racial preferences. They had 2 options, same as mine, or it doesn't matter. Roughly half of white women and 80% of white men said that race didn't matter to them. That sounds progressive, right? People declaring that they don't care about race. But the actual behavior told a very different story. When the economists analyzed who people actually contacted, who they actually sent messages to, the gap between stated preference and revealed preference was enormous. White men who said race didn't matter sent 90% of their messages to white women. White women who said race didn't matter sent 97% of their messages to white men. An Asian man with identical qualifications to a white man, same education, same income, same attractiveness rating, received fewer than 25% as many messages from white women. Black and Latino men who were equally qualified received roughly half as many messages as their white counterparts, and these numbers came specifically from people who had publicly declared that race was irrelevant to them. This is the gap between who we say we are and who we actually are. In public, in the light of day, we present our best selves. We declare our values, we signal our virtue, but in the privacy of our keyboards, in the anonymity of an inbox, the real preferences emerge. This isn't unique to dating. It's how discrimination actually works in the modern world. Most people aren't overtly bigoted. Most people genuinely believe they're fair-minded. But the data consistently shows that unconscious preferences we might not even be aware of, shape our decisions in ways we'd never consciously endorse. This is why Levitt's approach is so valuable. He doesn't ask people what they believe. He watches what they do. And the gap between those two things is where the real story lives. The same principle applies to countless areas beyond dating. Hiring managers who swear they don't discriminate still show measurable bias in resume screening experiments. Landlords who believe in equal housing still respond differently to applicants with different-sounding names. Judges who pride themselves on objectivity still show sentencing disparities based on race and socioeconomic status. Freakonomics doesn't accuse anyone of being racist. What it does is far more subtle and far more important. It reveals the gap between our aspirations and our actions. It shows us that good intentions are not enough, that declaring yourself fair-minded doesn't make you fair acting, and that the only way to truly understand human behavior is to measure it, not to ask about it. There's one more angle on the crack story that I think deserves attention, because it reveals something profound about how innovation works, both in legitimate and illegitimate markets. Before crack, cocaine was a drug for the wealthy. It was expensive, it came in powder form, and it was associated with Wall Street traders and Hollywood parties. The market was limited by the price point. Most Americans simply couldn't afford it. Then, sometime in the early 1980s, someone figured out how to convert powder cocaine into a smokable form, crack. That could be sold in tiny, affordable doses. A single hit of crack cost just a few dollars, compared to the $100 price of a gram of powder cocaine. In business terms, this was a textbook innovation. Someone took an existing product, found a way to make it cheaper and more accessible, and opened up an entirely new market segment. It's the same playbook that Henry Ford used with automobiles, that Ray Kroc used with hamburgers, that Steve Jobs used with personal computers. Take something expensive and exclusive, make it cheap and available to everyone. The book compares the invention of crack to the invention of nylon stockings. Before nylon, women's stockings were made of silk, expensive and fragile. Nylon stockings were cheap, durable, and accessible to working-class women. The innovation democratized the product. Crack did the same thing with cocaine. The early crack dealers, the ones who established territories and built organizations in the mid-1980s, were like early employees at a tech startup. They got in on the ground floor of a booming new market. The money was extraordinary. They were the Microsoft millionaires of the drug world. But just like in tech, the market eventually matured. Competition increased. Territories were carved up. Margins compressed. The later crack dealers, the ones who entered the market in the early 1990s, were like joining a dot-com startup in 2000. The easy money was gone. All that was left was the risk. This is the life cycle of every market, legal or illegal. The pioneers take huge risks and reap huge rewards. The followers take the same risks but get diminishing returns. And the last entrants take all the risks for almost no reward. It's true for tech startups, it's true for real estate speculation, and it's true for crack gangs. The difference is that when a tech startup fails, you lose your investment. When a crack operation fails, you lose your life. The story of information versus monopoly power runs throughout human history, and it's worth zooming out for a moment to appreciate just how significant this dynamic is. For most of human history, power was concentrated in the hands of those who controlled information. Priests controlled access to religious texts and thus controlled entire civilizations. Guilds controlled trade secrets and thus controlled entire industries. Governments controlled access to maps, census data, and military intelligence, and thus controlled entire nations. Every major democratic revolution has, at its core, been a revolution of information. The printing press didn't just make books cheaper, it broke the church's monopoly on knowledge. Public education didn't just create literate citizens, it broke the elite's monopoly on intellectual capital. Freedom of the press didn't just protect journalists, it broke the government's monopoly on the narrative. And the internet? The internet broke all of those monopolies simultaneously. It broke the doctor's monopoly on medical knowledge, the lawyer's monopoly on legal information, the broker's monopoly on financial data, the professor's monopoly on academic research, and the journalist's monopoly on news. This is why the internet is the most disruptive technology since the printing press. It's not because of cat videos or social media or e-commerce. It's because it fundamentally destroyed the information asymmetries that had propped up every institutional power structure for centuries. And every story in Freakonomics is ultimately a story about what happens when those asymmetries are challenged. The Klan loses power when its secrets are exposed. Real estate agents lose their edge when housing data goes online. Experts lose credibility when their predictions can be fact-checked in real time. We're living through the greatest democratization of information in human history. The question is, are you using it? Are you actually looking up the data behind the claims, checking the expert's track record, comparing the agent's advice to publicly available information? Or are you still trusting the priest, the guildmaster, and the king? Because the information is there. It's free. It's accessible. The only thing stopping you from using it is the assumption that someone else already has it figured out. They don't. That's the whole point of Freakonomics. Nobody has it figured out, but if you're willing to look at the data yourself, really look, with skepticism and curiosity and an open mind, you'll get closer to the truth than any expert ever could. And that, my friends, is a wrap. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, type Stonks in the comments so I know who the real ones are. Subscribe, hit the bell, share this with someone who needs to hear it. I pour my heart into these videos, and your support is what keeps this channel alive. See you in the next one.